Good morning, folks, and welcome back to the next tutorial on IXP Manager. What we've done to date has been about installing IXP Manager, upgrading it, and just the initial setup that you need to make it fit for day-to-day use. What we're moving on to now is the new series of courses where we start going through IXP Manager in how you would actually use it to run your Internet Exchange point. Today what we're going to look at is managing members. So we're going to look at adding members and all the kind of features that go around that. We're not going to get into provisioning ports or anything today. Today is really just about the first steps in adding members to your exchange through IXP Manager. What we're running on today is IXP Manager version 5.6. This is the one that's currently released, and it's also the installation that we we're essentially following on from our upgrade in the last video. So it's the exact same virtual machines I'm using here, and it's just a carry on over. So let me share my screen. So here's the login page. So I'm just going to log in. So as I said, this is exactly where we left it off. All of the elements that we've already added in our initial steps are also there. So our racks and so on are still there. What we don't have yet is members. So all we have is the mandatory member that you have to set up, which is the member that represents your own Internet Exchange, which for us is SCIX or some city Internet Exchange. What we want to do now is start adding peering members to the exchange. So I'm going to use Facebook, who are one of our patrons. I'm going to add them to the exchange with my add button here. So you can see if you were logging into IXP Manager and you were presented with the dashboard, to add a new member, you just go to members and add on the top left. Just start this fresh. So when you come to adding a member or a customer, so at INEX we have members, you might see the language. The language is actually configurable in your .m file. So this is me logged into the server running IXP Manager, and the m file, so /serve/IXP Manager is where we have it, and the env file is where we set up these installation specific settings, and in that you will find an option. Actually, what I'll do is I'll take the example file that ships with IXP Manager, where all of the options I've kind of cut down my one just to get the bits I need. So this is the one that you would start with, where you get to put in all of the information from scratch, and in there you've got this member versus customer. So IXP Manager is an open source project and typically used in member-owned IXPs. As such, the language used mostly is member. To change this to customer, just uncomment the following lines. So it is mostly around members, and you can see members here on the left. Obviously, we've missed a few bits along the way when we were just turning that from tight member language to member or customer on preference. So we'll come back and fix that. But this is the your new customers details. So two things to remember that are always important in IXP Manager is that usually you will find a documentation link on the top right where we've written documentation. So if I click on that, you're going to be brought to the docs.ixpmanager.org website, where we have documentation on customers and members. And it takes you through all of the elements that you would need on this page, as well as other things that we're going to go through today around adding and managing members. The second thing is that almost all of our pages have these green help buttons, and they enable context-specific help on each of the input fields. So it gives you an explanation of what this field is and what kind of information you should put in there. And that is usually available in all forms in IXP Manager, and we'd certainly welcome issues or pull requests that might add those to any forms where they're missing. Now, there is a lot of information here, and one thing that we've done is we're going to allow you to pre-populate this form from PeeringDB by entering an ASN here. So I'm going to go off to PeeringDB just to get Facebook's ASN. Let's see, Facebook, here we go. And I'm going to copy that ASN into this box, and I'm going to hit populate. So now you can see that we've gone off and gotten an awful lot of information from PeeringDB, or at least all of the information that's publicly available. Some elements that we've missed here are things like some not contact details, and what you need to do to get that extra information is add a username and password to IXP Manager. So if I go down to PeeringDB in the documentation, you'll find a section on adding customers. And for maximum benefit, you should configure a user on PeeringDB for your IXP Manager installation and set those details in the .m file. So if I look at my example M file again, which again is the one you start with, and if I find PeeringDB, you'll see there's an element here you need to uncomment and add in a PeeringDB username and password. When we created this, and so far as I know, PeeringDB doesn't have the option for OAuth keys, so you have to configure an actual username and password. So just create a brand new user in PeeringDB, and you should be able to configure it here. IXP Manager will log into PeeringDB and do that request through an authenticated interface rather than through the public interface, and you'll get more information for these elements down here. So let's look at all of this information just in context with the help turned on. The name is obviously the customer's name, and when we ask a customer to when they're joining, the name that we're asking for them is how they want that presented on member lists and publicly. It's not the official business name. So Facebook is good enough here. A member type, there are 4 types of members in IXP Manager. Associate is more of a marketing membership type, that companies that want to be associated with the exchange but don't peer. So that's not relevant here. Internal is really, there's 2 use cases for internal. There's the member that we had to create, the Some City Internet Exchange member, and then there's root servers usually. So that doesn't apply here either. So then there's down to pro bono in full. Pro bono is usually something like a member that's for the good of the internet where you're not charging them for the port. So that might be something like a not-for-profit DNS root server, or the AS112 service, or elements like that. Every other member will be a full member, a full normal peering member. Short name, we don't really use. It's being removed. We used to use it as a key for things like graphs and stuff, directory structures, but then the problem is that when you change the short name, that doesn't get reflected back. So we're slowly removing it. For now, just leave it in. It really just does a lowercase of the name, limited to I think 10 characters. The corporate website, so that again is where we would publicly display that information to link through to the member's website. The join date will be the official date that they've joined the exchange. I'm just going to set that to yesterday here, for example. The date left is important. If you set this, it's effectively how you close the member's account. So leave that blank. Choose the status. So this, it's best here really to set this to normal in all cases. Suspended and not connected may flow into other elements down the road, but there's other ways of setting a customer to not connected, such as setting their port to disconnected. So for now, we would advise just set all members to normal at this point in time. MD5 is a hint. You can use that information in peering request emails that we'll see down the road, and it's a hint where the member is trying to tell potential peers at the exchange what their MD5 policy is. If it's not something you're going to support, it's not something INEX supports, for example, it was added for other exchanges, we just leave it as unknown for now. If you're going to use it, it's probably something that you're going to want to capture on a membership application form. The abbreviated name is something that we use in things like graph headers where we don't have a lot of space. So if you've got a member with a really long name, you might want to try and get an abbreviated version here. Now we're moving on to peering details. The AS number is self-explanatory. The max prefixes is what we display to other members about their max prefixes, but it's also how we configure root collectors and root servers and AS112 services. So it is an important setting. We'll come back to it in a second about how we figure it out. The peering email, so it's typically going to be something like peering at, my autocomplete is on, but anyway, facebook.com. Their AS peering macro, and their IPv4 peering macro and their IPv6 peering macro if it's different. We do have 2 settings for this. One thing we're lacking is 2 settings for max prefixes. Unfortunately, this applies to v4 and v6, which isn't great. It's something that we're going to have to look at. But for now, just bear in mind that this applies to both. So you're going to want to go with the v4 version for now. So now that we have the peering macro, actually, let me just finish up here. Peering policy, here are your options. An open peering policy would normally indicate that the member will peer with anybody and will also join the root servers. Selective normally means that they won't join the root servers and you have to request a peering session with them, and they will probably say yes, but not always. Mandatory is only really something for the exchange, and that would be, for example, our root collectors. All members at INEX have to peer with the root collectors. So the only member at INEX that has a mandatory peering policy is the root collectors. And closed would be something like IP transit providers that join the exchange. They would typically have a closed peering policy and would usually only peer with a very small number of members. So usually you're going to be open or selective for most. Facebook, we got it from PeeringDB that they're selective, so we're not going to override that. The active peering matrix is where we, through SFlow, we can see established TCP packets on port 179 between IP addresses of the at the exchange. And when we see that, then we can say that, look, we can now identify a bilateral peering session between two members, and then that will feed into a public peering matrix. And if your member doesn't want to peer in that peering matrix, you can uncheck this box. At INEX, I don't think we've ever had a member ask us not to display their detail on the peering matrix. So I just want to get back to match prefixes here and IRDB source. So the Internet Routing Registry database is what we use to figure out the published peering routes, or the published routes that an AS may have. And INEX is based in Europe, so for the most part, our IRDB source is just going to be RIPE. If you have an international member like Facebook, you're going to want to ask them what IRDB sources you should be querying for them if they plan to peer on the root servers. For Facebook, what we use is ORADB and RIPE. And with that information, what IXP Manager does in the background with this information, and we go into more detail about this when we get to root servers, but we use a tool called BGPQ3, and because the source is ORADB and RIPE, I want to get the IPv4 root objects that have been registered by Facebook, by AS Facebook, at those two routing registries. If I hit enter here, so I've got a lot of prefixes. Let's see how many there are. So 247. So Facebook are probably telling the truth. Not probably, I have no doubt they're telling the truth. When they say that their IPv4 prefix is 100. An important note here is that IXP Manager takes that and adds 20% to give you a little bit of headroom. They're probably absolutely telling the truth that you won't expect to see more than 100 prefixes from them, because they'll, as a CDN, they'll probably advertise certain prefixes geographically. Because this is telling me there's 247, what I would typically do here is I would just put in slightly higher number, a little bit of headroom, which means it's not something which makes match prefixes something that I'm not really going to have to worry about operationally at all. Remember, there's I think there's something like 800,000 IPv4 prefixes in the default free zone now. 500 is a really small number compared to that, and if Facebook do have a root leak, they're going to hit 500 really, really quick. Or if any member has a root leak, they're going to hit 500 really quick. So that is a perfectly safe number. It's not too high, but it's sufficiently high that it's not going to cause us any operational problems in general use. So that's all of that. The NOC details is next. I'm just going to put in a making up phone number here. So that's their phone if they don't have a 24-hour NOC. That's their 24-hour NOC phone. NOC at, let's just stick in something here, fb.com. NOC hours, so Facebook will be 24/7. I don't know if this, like, what's useful here for in terms of a NOC web page is if someone had an AS1234.net web page, or if they had a status web page, network status web page, or something like that. Larger networks sometimes have it, smaller networks don't. So there's my member successfully added, and what I'm on now is some of the registration details and the billing details. Let me hide that away and let me put on help here just to talk about this. So IXP Manager does not provide any accounting invoicing functionality. All the information on this page is information for your own record keeping. None of it is required. So you can add this in if you want to. So registered name again might be the more formal version of Facebook. Company number, where they might be registered. There's nothing in here yet, but this, when you put something in here and hit enter, it will create the jurisdiction. So an address, so one, the road, some suburb, somewhere, town, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We'll put that in Ireland. So the only reason I'm putting that in is to show you that we do have some useful tools here. So that will just copy that information right across just to save you retyping it. Again, INEX normally bills annually. Accounts at fb.com, it's the kind of thing you would put there. And you might put in the same for your invoice. Is a purchase order required or not? We generally do everything by email. We'd send it here. VAT rate, VAT number. So like VAT rate for Ireland would be standard VAT rate, which would be 23%. And VAT number, if we were selling into an EU country, we'd need their EU VAT number. So maybe it was like GB 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So again, none of this is required. It is optional. It is just a way for you to record that information. So we've added Facebook. We're on the details page because that's what we've just finished. Here is the overview. Now that Facebook has been added, if we go and look at members, we will see now that we have Facebook, and in our jump to member, this is a auto as you type. It's a quick way to get to a member. So Facebook is now added, but there are a few more things that we can do just to make the Facebook member overview page and record a bit more nicer and a bit more useful. One of the first things that we're going to look at is a logo for Facebook. So one thing I know here is I actually don't have a logo option. I think it's on by default, but let's have a look at the m.example file. And let me just find logo in here. Not that one, not that one. Okay. Allow customers admins to upload logos for members. Set this to false to enable. To enable, so typo there. So IXP front end disabled logo is false. So that I mustn't have that setting in the one I'm running here. For some reason, I must have just copied this M file from somewhere else at some point. Or actually maybe the automated installer. I'll actually make a note to look at that. I suspect the auto installer, when it creates the M file, doesn't include the logo setting. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go to the end of this file and I'm just going to paste in here that line. If I come back here and refresh this page, I should now be able to manage logo. Perfect. So the logo was really added for an INEX specific task, and the reason it was added at INEX was so that we could create this this changing carousel of logos at the bottom of our page. And you can see that some members haven't heeded the hint for a transparent background, which the reason we asked for transparent background was just so that the logo would fit on any light colored page. It's not, although it was added for that particular purpose, what we have tended to use it for laterally, what other exchanges use it for, is to make the member overview page much nicer. So this is how the member overview page looks now when you have a Facebook logo added to it. The other thing you can do with logos is when you're in the members tab here, there's a members logo option that will show you sort of a wall of all your member logos as well. So that's the logo element done. I'm just looking to my right here because I have some notes about what to go through. The next thing to go through is tags. So There are some things that are built into IXP Manager that give you information about a member, such as the status being normal, the type being full, the peering policy being selective, and so on. But you may often have cases where you want to tag members with some information that's specific to whatever's happening in your own internet exchange, as technically or as a business or marketing or sales. And for that we have something called tags. Again, note that there's a documentation button here, and if you go there, it brings you straight to a page telling you about customer tags. I'm going to add a tag, and again there's help information here. So one of the examples in the documentation about tags is I was talking about INEX had a 100 meg upgrade program, and what that was when we were phasing out 100 meg ports, we were offering a 1 gig. The member had paid for a 100 meg port, but we were offering them a gig port free for a period of time if they agreed on the next billing cycle to upgrade to a gig. And that was then they became part of the 100 meg upgrade program. So that was an internal only tag, a tag that isn't visible to the member or exported through various ways of exporting member information. So there's our member upgrade program. And now that I've added a tag, this add tags option automatically appears in your customer overview. And I can now add a tag. So the only tag I have available here is 100 meg upgrade. If there was other ones, I could check them or uncheck them and save changes. Now that the member has a tag, the add tag becomes edit tags. Again, the same option. It's just a language change. And you can see now that as you add tags to the member, you can build out little bullets here giving you more information about the member. The other thing that's important about tags is that once you have tags defined and allocated to a member, you can now see all members with a specific tag. So there we have it. I am looking at all members with the 100 meg upgrade program tag. So the next thing to have a quick look at is when you add a member, you're normally going to want to send them a welcome email, usually to their NOC. And that welcome will normally have an awful lot of information about your exchange. You know, their connection details, and again, you wouldn't really do this until after you've provisioned a port and things like that, but that welcome email will have their connection details, their port allocation, cross-connect information, speed, root collector details, root server details, AS112 service details, portal details, and so on. And on INEX, we've been sending a welcome email for 15-20 years now, and this template is based on INEX's welcome email. And again, here's some documentation telling you all about welcome emails and specifically how to change that welcome email, how to template it to make it specific to your own IXP, to your own language, to your own way of talking. Is it official? Is it friendly? And so on and so forth. The 2 is normally pre-populated with the NOC details, but you can remove that and add other emails here. Same for CC. The BCC is your own exchange email address that was set up in the .m file. You've got a subject, and then you've got a markdown an email that will be sent as HTML written in Markdown, so you can preview how it's going to look with the base Markdown here. So again, as I said, you can see this is warning you this is a sample one that you really need to skin it. Your connection details, your member portal, your root servers, getting cross connects, how to contact operations, peering information, your NOC details, do we have them right? AS112 service, please mark your connection to us on PeeringDB, and so on. And then you can send that email. So that's a very useful feature, especially as you start adding more and more members to your exchange. There is a public view of the member, which we should take a quick look at. So member details is what's publicly available to anyone that comes to IXP Manager without logging in, and it's also what's available through your IXF export and things like that. So Facebook's view of that is their member name, their peering policy, when they joined, their AS number, and their peering email. Sorry, peering email is actually only available when you're logged in. Facebook, and this is sort of the public face, and we might look at this when we log out later. Again, you see the logo, kind of a nice looking calling card for Facebook's connection to your exchange. And if there were connections, you would see them down here. In fact, rather than talk about it, let's look at it on INX's member details. So let's find, so this is what it looks like when you're not logged in. Here's Facebook, and you can see that it gives you they're connected to INX LAN 1 at 100 gig in Equinix DB1. There's their IP addresses. They're on the root servers. They don't use the AS112 root service, and they're on INX LAN 2 also in DB1 at 100 gig, and they're on the root server there. So there is the kind of calling card for that member at INX. You will have noticed that INX's version had a MANRS logo. So MANRS is a mutually agreed norms for routing security. I'm not going to talk about MANRS as a program here, but just to show you how IXP Manager supports the program. If you look at the documentation, you'll find a section on MANRS. There we go. And it gives you a link to tell you all about MANRS. But what it's telling you here is that if a member has gone through the MANRS program and got MANRS accreditation for conforming to those norms of routing security, which is a very important thing to do, you get this very nice green badge to tell you that you are MANRS compliant. What IXP Manager will do is every single night it will check with MANRS to see if any new AS numbers have been added to the program, and if they had, it will mark that member as MANRS compliant within IXP Manager's own database. So just running it here, what you can see is before there were no MANRS compliant. Afterwards there was one, and there's one missing, and that's the SCIX, the fake one that we've entered. So that's fine. We can safely ignore that. Now if we go back to Facebook and just reload this page, now you see MANRS, which is excellent. And it's also on the it's also available on the administrative overview of the member. Then there's PeeringDB. So if we look down here at PeeringDB, we can see that this is set to no, but we know that Facebook has a PeeringDB record. And if we have a look at the documentation again for PeeringDB, it's important to say that this is not something you need to do. None of this is something you need to do, in fact. This is scheduled to go off every single once a day, and the way that works is when you install IXP Manager, you would have put into your cron tab a line that kicks off IXP Manager's scheduler every once a minute, and that scheduler will look at what it needs to run, and one of the things it runs on a daily basis is that MANRS script. Another thing it runs on a daily basis is the PeeringDB script. I'm just doing it manually now just to show you how it works and the effect it has. So if we look at PeeringDB, there's a number of things in here for PeeringDB, but one of them is the existence of PeeringDB records. And again, another script that is run on a nightly basis, just like the MANRS one, is this PeeringDB one, and that will go off and get all of the ASNs that are registered as networks in PeeringDB, and if your member has a record of PeeringDB, it will update the IXP Manager database to reflect that. So here we go again. If we go back to Facebook, refresh that page, that no becomes a yes, and it gives us direct link to that record in PeeringDB. One other thing to note is that all of our AS numbers are usually clickable, and it will go off and do an AS number lookup, ideally at PeeringDB, which is exactly what we have here. And it will effectively use PeeringDB's whois service to get some quick information on a particular AS number. That also works in the looking glass for the root servers and things like that as well. So it's a very useful little tool to be able to click on. I think it works for IP addresses as well. So that's MANRS and PeeringDB. The next thing is just have a quick look along the tab here. So we have the billing and registration details that we already saw. Ports is something that we're not going to look at today. We'll look at ports in a separate video. Users is how you give users in your member, so users in Facebook, access to the member portal of IXP Manager. So I can add a user. The way we do it is we start off with an with an email address. And when you click add here, what IXP Manager does is go and see, is that email address already associated with another user? And if it is, you can add Facebook to that user's profile. That's useful where a user might be a contractor for more than one exchange. It often happens with small networks in a local area. So I don't have that here. So just put in the detail, username, email address. Don't need a Facebook, sorry, I don't need a mobile number. The member is Facebook. And then there's two privilege levels, customer administrator and customer user. This essentially boils down to read, write, and read only. The customer administrator has the ability to change logos, to add other users, which is very important and useful feature, and to add and manage contacts as well. So you definitely need, or you should definitely have at least one user in your member organization as a customer administrator. So when I click add, what happens there is that user is going to get an email to say, welcome to IXP Manager, please reset your password. And there is documentation about that as well. So again, IXP member actions on the left, we have users. The user tab here gives you users for this particular member, but there is a users tab on the left that gives you all the users at the exchange or at configured IXP Manager. And again, that comes with a link to documentation, and part of that documentation includes information on the welcome email and how you can edit it to put in some specific information to do with your IXP. I jump back to Facebook here. The second element we have is contacts. So this is where you may want to add people who are contacts, maybe people in marketing or sales or technical that don't have a user account. So again, you can put in anything you want here, Facebook, email address, phone number, mobile, and what kind of role do they have? Do they have a billing role, a technical role, admin, marketing? You can put in some notes as well to do with that. Important to say that, again, customer administrators can see all of this information. And in fact, if I pop back to users here, I have this user added. One thing to note is that you can log in as that user. So this is me now logging in as that Facebook user, seeing what they would see. This is very useful for diagnostics. If they're complaining about something in their portal that's not quite right, you can log in as them and see what they see. So they have the ability, the customer administrator, the ability to update knock and billing contact details. They have no ports, they have no cross connects yet. Up here is where they would manage their users. So they can also add their own user in the same way. And they can also manage contacts. So they can edit this contact, for example. They can view this contact. And they can delete that contact. One thing they can't see is any notes that you may have entered about the contact. I'm going to switch back again. So that's our users and our contacts. Logins. You can see that I logged in. That's a bug that's actually has been fixed and will be in the next release. It only exists, I think, in probably 2-point releases, and that is where when you switch to a user as an admin, it shouldn't create a login entry, because that will just add confusion. Currently, there's a bug where it is actually adding that as a login, and we're going to have that fixed in the next release. So typically, when you switch to a user, that doesn't show up as a login log. You have notes. Notes are very useful, actually. So the first thing is on your administrator user profile, you have this member notes option, and you can disable all email notifications. Email me on changes to only watched members and notes, and I think that's the default. And email me on any change to any member note. So you, depending on your role in the organization, you probably want a default, which is email me on changes to only watched members and notes. So if I go back to Facebook and show you what that actually means. So for Facebook notes, Facebook currently doesn't have any notes. Now, if I want to watch any changes or additions to any notes for Facebook, I can click this icon here, and that will allow me to watch all notes to do with Facebook. I'm going to add a note. Member complaint poor support. Of course, this is very unrealistic because this would never happen at Linux. I can enter notes about Joe Blogs, not because he didn't respond fast enough. Now, so that would be the note you might add in. You can preview it as Markdown, and you can make the note visible to the customer as well. So that'll give you a warning. So your customer will be able to read this note. So just to make sure that you don't disclose any internal information about any other members or anything else, it just gives you a warning about that. So I can add that note. I can see my title, and I can view the note here. I can watch for any updates or edits on that note. So that is where you watch any notes to do with the member, or you can watch a specific note. I can edit it and I can delete it. Just so you know, because we made that visible to the customer, and just to show you what that looks like, when the customer comes in, he can see that there is one note that he hasn't seen, and you can view that note. Let me switch back. So that's notes. And if I was watching all notes on all customers, I would have got an email. If I was watching notes on just this customer, I would have got an email. Or if I was watching this note, I'd get an email if it was edited or deleted. So the notes are quite useful. It's really up to your own exchange to decide how you want to use that. It wouldn't, for example, you'd normally have a support desk that would deal with operational stuff. It's to do with notes. It can be useful around provisioning and things like that. Yes, documents. So a new feature that was only released in version 5.6 is a document store is a per member document store. So this would be Facebook's document store, and I have this message because it's empty. So the first thing I might want to do is add a folder. And let's say I add a folder for official agreements. And I might give this a description. So this folder contains, now this again is Markdown enabled, so official documents such as member agreements or contracts, service order forms, etc. So just it gives a description for the folder. Again, you can preview the Markdown here. I can create that. So I now have in my document store that kind of welcome message you saw, which was only available for administrators. It's gone, and you can see now that sorry, if I just go back to the root directory, so you can see that this is what you would see. In fact, let's just, so that there's no confusion, go back to Facebook and go into documents. This is exactly what you would see. That welcome message is gone, and I now have one folder, official documents. I can go in here. I can see how that description is displayed. It's displayed in a kind of a blue well, and now I can add documents to this. So let's browse to, let's take the logo again. If you do the file first, it will create the name the same as the file. You could also change this to anything you wanted. Sorry. Important to keep the extension right, because that's how IXP Manager will identify the file and set the content type in the response when you try and download it. SHA-256 isn't necessary. If this was added, and you can see the documentation for INEX board minutes where they would give us a document to upload as well as a SHA-256 which they'd publish to the members mailing list. That would allow you to compare it. If you put in a SHA here, it would also have IXP Manager compare the actual SHA, the file, to the SHA entered and give you an error if it was wrong. The minimum privilege is the minimum privilege required to view this document. So super user means that only admins can see this document. Customer administrator means that customer administrator users and admins can see it, and then customer user means that any user in Facebook's account and any administrator at the exchange can see it. So we'll allow this to be visible to any user in Facebook or any admin, any IXP admin. I don't need a description for this, just upload it. And there you have the Facebook logo file. It's visible for the cust user and above. It was uploaded on June 20th. And I can see some metadata, which would show me where on the hard drive it's stored on the server, who created it, what customer it's allocated, it's assigned to, last modified, and the size. Again, if I jump back to Facebook and go in as the Facebook user and look at documents, I can now see official agreements. There's the Facebook. I can download that, and up it pops. Switch back again. So that is per member documents. You should note that there are actually on the menu on the left, document store. There's two types of document store. The one that you see here when you click on the left is a general document store that's available to all members, including the ability to add a file that's available publicly. And if there was a file available publicly, when you come to IXP Manager without logging in, you'd see an option here for the document store. The general document store would be used for things like putting in upgrade forms that are relevant to every member, maybe board documents, maybe downloadable instructions around root servers and things like that. The per member document is for documents that are only available to users of a specific member. When you click on the member documents here, only members that actually have documents uploaded will appear on the list. So the Some City Internet Exchange member, sorry, that's still, just be careful here, that's still set to that tag up here. Go back to all tags. So the Some City Internet Exchange member has no documents. So when you go to document store and member documents, you don't see that member. You only see the member that has documents, which is Facebook in this case. And that was the official agreements and the Facebook logo. We pop back to Facebook. So we're nearly actually at the end of this video. I've only one or two other small things to show you. If we go up to my account and API keys, the reason I'm going here is not because I want an API key, but just I want to get the URL for the IXF member export. I'm just going to copy this. In fact, I'm even going to copy it. I'm just going to right click and open in a new tab. And the reason I want to show you this is now that we've added Facebook. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm too quick to this. Facebook won't show up on the member list until we've allocated the report. So actually we'll come back to this again in a different video. And the last thing I wanted to show you was one thing that will work and one thing that might not work. So Facebook, let's say that unfortunately Facebook have decided to resign their membership at this exchange, Some City Internet Exchange. The way we turn down a member is obviously the first thing we do is unprovision any ports and things like that. But once we've removed all of the services that Facebook may have at the exchange, we need to disable their membership. Now, you could obviously delete the member. It's probably not what you want to do. It's not what we do. What we do is we mark the member as closed. So in fact, if I just set this back to 18th and set this guy to the 19th of June 2020, and I save that. So by setting an end date, you can see that actually marks the account as closed. And for closed accounts, it'll be very clear here. And you have an option up here in terms of your members list. You can just show current members rather than show all members. When you select something here, that's remembered across sessions. It's stored in your local storage. So as long as you're not clearing out your cache, it'll remember your preferences here. So that's one way of doing it. And closed members don't appear in options such as this, like Facebook is gone from here. So once a member is closed, normally they're hidden away, because I would normally have show current members only on, and they don't show up in lists anymore. They shouldn't be in the document store, no. So again, so they're hidden away. But you can see them and you can go into them. And the second thing I want to show you that I said might not work is to delete the member. And the reason this might not work is because we were working on some stuff recently, which I've which I think I've downloaded some development code to this. What it's telling me here is that when I delete this member, I'm going to delete, so no connections, but one contact and one user. What I'm worried about is that I'm not sure if we've added the document store to this. So let's see what happens if I do this. Maybe it will work. Yeah. So it's complaining of a constraint because we haven't fixed the doc store customer directories one here. So I'm going to have to open a ticket, and myself again will look at fixing that. But the delete member really is the reason it exists is more about development use, and maybe you do want to permanently delete a member. What we would normally do is delete all the users and contacts. We normally keep the member around for historical reasons. I can probably work around that by going into Facebook official agreements. And if I just go up here to the folder, I should be able to delete that. Okay, good, that's gone. If I go back to that member, I probably can delete it now. I'd say that was probably the only thing we forgot. Yeah, so that Facebook fully gone now from the system. I think that's all I wanted to go through with you. Yeah, so that is managing members at through IXP Manager. I've been talking 45 minutes. I think that's definitely long enough for this video. So hopefully that was useful. Certainly if these videos are useful, feel free to reach out to me on Twitter and let me know. Certainly good to know that people are watching it, because there are view counts clocking up in the existing YouTube ones. What we'll probably cover in the next one is we're going to start looking at provisioning ports. And then after that, what we'll probably do is start looking at root collectors and root servers. But I think the next one is going to be around interfaces and ports and how you provision a port for a member. So again, I hope that was useful. Thank you all for watching, and I will talk to you next time. Good luck.